This time on CEO saying dumb shit. So Skull and Bones, we know what a nightmare this has been for Ubisoft for the past over a decade now. Kotaku here reports that development for Skull and Bones began back in 2013. It's 2024 now, and the game is finally launching this year, but it's been a hell of a road. And the only reason they even decided to finish this was because of a deal they made with the Singapore government. So they can't let this game die. They are obligated to finish it. And the end result has been troubled development that has been rife with reboots and tons of delays. I mean, here's an update indicating a delay. And you can see how many articles throughout the course of these past few months and years. We're talking about a game that by 2023 got delayed for a sixth time, which is, unprecedented. And beyond that, leadership for the game has been constantly shifting, with the game having lost numerous creative directors. Back in September of 2023, it was reported that the game had lost its third creative director, and that is amidst Ubisoft Singapore facing an organized labor campaign. So rough goings all around. And the reception for this game throughout its marketing has been less than stellar. Here is a gameplay trailer from back in September 2022 that has tons more dislikes than likes. And even looking at some of the more recent trailers, like the launch trailer here, you can see that people were not happy with the techno music that is not befitting of a pirate game, but also there's still skepticism surrounding whether this is a game that can hold our attention, if just the naval combat of Assassin's Creed 4 can really stand on its own. Yes, it's extrapolated upon, but it's not really like a true pirate experience because you're just controlling ships, you're not really being like a pirate. And here's some gameplay stuff that they showed off with some developer commentary that has mixed reception, more likes than your usual trailer, but still, not a particularly stellar reception either. And so now we're at a point where the game is an open beta. People have been playing portions of the game, and also a roadmap for the game has been announced, suggesting that the intention for it is for this to be a long-term live service. And there's an open beta that goes on from February 8th to 11th. And in terms of what impressions have been saying, they've been pretty mixed. News outlets don't seem too enthralled by this game. So, for example, PC Gamers said after playing the beta that Skull and Bones just made me want to play Sea of Thieves again. And then beyond that, you got Kotaku here, who said that Skull and Bones is less the pirate life and more the Division. Skull and Bones open beta hasn't sold me on this game being worth the long, arduous wait. And then we have right here PC Game Zen, who said that 8 years later, Skull and Bones repeats the Division's biggest sin. So that's kind of where reception's at. Now, if you look at what people on social media are saying, gamers are just kind of checking this out to see if this is up their alley. We've got an array of feedback. Some people are enjoying the experience based on the first few hours that they've played of it. Others are mixed, and then others are like, ooh, this is definitely not for me. So right here we have Adrian, who said, I tried the Skull and Bones beta. It truly saddened me to see how formula proven to work in Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag can be turned into the broken, buggy mess of a live service MMO. Ubisoft has fallen far. But then others are saying things like, I was not expecting to enjoy Skull and Bones at all, but I cannot stop playing the open beta. The game is much better than I expected, and it's just so fun to play. Definitely not the game for everyone, but if you like naval combat, check out the open beta before it ends this weekend. And then you've got more sort of middle-of-the-road feedback, like from Chris here, who said that I've been playing quite a bit of Skull and Bones beta, and while I'm having fun, I do have concerns about long-term enjoyment. We wanted more of the Black Flag naval combat, but with the other elements stripped away now, just boots on the ground stuff, essentially, the pirate life stuff, I'm not sure it works as well with just the naval combat. Like, the core mechanics seem to work well enough for it to have some short-term fun elements, but in terms of can this hold you and your attention as a long-term life service, that's where the questions are arising. And then that brings us to what Ubisoft CEO Yves Guillemot recently said about the justification of making Skull and Bones a $70 game, despite the fact that it's a live service, during a Q&A during a conference call discussing Ubisoft's Q3 sales for its fiscal year 2024. one caller pointed out how, well, this is a live service, and given that this game, like reception-wise, isn't doing so well throughout its marketing, wouldn't it be better to make it like a free-to-play and lean into, monetization elements instead of charging a whopping $70 for this thing and potentially limiting the size of its player base, suggesting that a free-to-play model may better suit the live service mechanics and give it a better chance of building a community, which, is an interesting point to raise. Guillermo replied with this dumb response that just makes absolutely no sense, and it's just him spouting corporate nonsense. He said, "You will see that Skull and Bones is a fully fledged game. It's a very big game, and we feel that people really see how vast and complete that game is. It's a really full triple, nay, quadruple A game that will deliver in the long run." What does that even mean, quadruple A? I've seen this term thrown around a few times. In fact, Ubisoft said the same thing about Beyond Good and Evil 2. They labeled this as a quadruple A game, as noticed here by Timmer222 back in 2020. And they also had this unannounced quadruple A game at Ubisoft Berlin that they named Quadruple A, and that's just like a term being thrown around there without any justification whatsoever. The closest game that I've seen come to potentially earning the label of Quadruple A is maybe GTA 6, because the budget for that game is like $1 billion. But at the end of the day, that's just a AAA game with a ridiculous budget. There's no such thing as quadruple A. That's just something that publishers are making up. The same thing was said about the Callisto Protocol. As WCCF Tech reported here back in 2022, the Callisto Protocol is a quadruple A game and is still coming in late 2022, says Crafton. And we all know how the Callisto Protocol turned out. It's a relatively short campaign experience that was not fully fleshed out, that paled in comparison to the Dead Space remake. And this is a game from the guy who made Dead Space, which made this doubly disappointing. And I don't know what about this game made it quadruple A. Like, yes, the graphics were nice, and you can tell that a lot of cool tech went behind it, but that doesn't make it quadruple A. That doesn't make it stand out from all of your AAA games that are far larger in scale than the Callisto Protocol. And, the people who develop those games don't label their games quadruple A. Baldur's Gate 3 is such a ridiculously expansive, jam-packed, dense experience, and they just call that a AAA game that technically an indie developer, Larian, made. And for Callisto Protocol to be considered quadruple A when it's nowhere close to, the scale and breadth of content that Baldur's Gate 3 offers, and just the quality that Baldur's Gate 3 offers, Callisto Protocol to label itself quadruple A was kind of nonsense. And now seeing Ubisoft label Sea of Thieves as quadruple A, that's also nonsense, because I don't predict that this game is going to be such a vastly, significantly more enhanced and significantly more substantial video game compared to existing live services like, say, Final Fantasy XIV or Destiny 2, that it deserves to be above, like, it deserves to have one more A than those games. You know what I mean? This is just pure, unadulterated nonsense, just pure corporate speak that's spouting out of the mouth of this business suit. And even the likes of Final Fantasy XIV and Destiny 2, these are huge games, but the reason they're as huge as they're now isn't because they're quadruple A games, it's because they're triple A games who've had a lot of support over many, many years and have had a lot of content additions that have made it the scale of, something that you might be able to call quadruple A. But at the end of the day, the base of it was a AAA game that got expanded with more development time. It's all just AAA. You add one more A and it doesn't mean anything. And judging by the responses and reactions we have seen to this statement, plenty of people agree that Ubisoft calling Skull and Bones, like especially Skull and Bones of all games, quadruple A, is absolute nonsense. Tons of people just kind of mocking the situation. Translation, this game's going to bomb and we're just trying to recoup as much of our losses as possible. You can't call something a quadruple A game just because you spent an ungodly amount of money rebooting it multiple times because you kept trying to make it a shitty live service game that no one wants, so on and so forth. And then beyond that, you've got like industry professionals like game developers and journalists who are chiming in on all of this. You've got Josh Sawyer, who is the head of Obsidian, who retweeted this report and posted the following image that says, fuck everything. We're doing 5 A's. Lucy James, quadruple A or ah is probably what Eve said every time it got delayed, to be honest. And you can see the kind of mockery that's going on here. Some people are straight up in disbelief at this. Jeff Grubb said, I'm going to be walking on clouds all day thinking about old Yves Guillemot calling Skull and Bones a quadruple A game. And people just like laughing that this statement is real and that it was said unironically. Another company that's used the term quadruple A is Microsoft, who described the initiative as its quadruple A studio. And the initiative, for those who don't know, is the studio under Microsoft's umbrella that's making the new Perfect Dark game. And I don't know what about this particular studio makes it quadruple A compared to the likes of, I don't know, Activision Blizzard, who've made these huge, MMOs and live service experiences, or compared to, say, Bethesda, who've made vast single-player experiences, whether you like them or not or whatever. Like, what makes the initiative quadruple A, and what does quadruple A exactly mean? It feels like they're throwing this term out there, but nobody can really define exactly what it is. That almost feels like it's completely falsely advertising the game and advertising it to be on a scale that it really isn't. When you say quadruple A, it's going to be so much bigger than triple A. It's going to be on such a different level that you could potentially justify that extra A. But, it's just Skull and Bones especially. It doesn't make sense for you to include that label on it. And then there's also Sega, who've not said quadruple A per se, but they've said like super game. They plan to release a super game within the next 5 years, according to this article from 2021. And then here's an article from 2022 where Sega said that its super game plan has multiple games and may use NFTs. So at that point, this whole super game idea loses any semblance of excitement behind it. To me, it almost sounds like the term quadruple A is being thrown around for games whose development cycle has been so long because of how troubled the development was and how much money and resources was spent on it, that budget-wise, and in terms of what a pain in the ass it was, maybe on that front, you could label it quadruple A. Notice how Skull and Bones and Beyond Good and Evil 2 got the label of quadruple A, and both of these games have one thing in common. They've been in development forever and have been extremely troubled and probably had way too many resources poured into it and wasted into it. And so the label of quadruple A seems to apply to games that blew up as a result of mismanagement, that grew on a scale that wasn't meant to be. But yeah, do not believe Yves Guillemot. Do not believe that Skull and Bones scale and breadth of content and level of substance is so vastly superior to your AAA games that it deserves the label of quadruple A and that it justifies its $70 price tag or whatever. It's all horseshit. I suspect that Skull and Bones is going to be a very kind of mid game that will kind of fade away unless the content support for it is substantial enough that it can kind of maintain a long-term live service model. And if that happens, great, but let's not act like this game is going to be on a whole other level compared to, the biggest AAA games that have come out in recent months and years, or that'll be coming out in future months and years. But at the very least, that's one man's take. Let me know in the comments below what your thoughts and opinions are on this notion that Skull and Bones is a quadruple A game and justifies its $70 price point, according to Ubisoft CEO. And to be further updated on all things gaming news, reviews, and discussions, stay tuned right here on Young Yeah. I'll see you guys next time. Young out.